Okay, so hello there. This is number one in a video series that I'm calling Ask the Pastor. And of course, my name is J. Dylan Proctor for those who may not know me. So today I'm going to be answering two questions which were posed over the week. The first one I'm going to get to is from Rachel Sorensen. And hi, Rachel. I hope you're doing well. We miss you terribly out this way, but I'm sure that you have so much going on in life. But I really do love the question that you asked, Rachel. And I also love how this sort of medium allows for you to still be involved in our activities in a very meaningful way. So you asked the question, and this is a great question. It says, how do we love people who are on a downward spiral? And you coupled that with the question of, loving people from a distance. And whenever I read this sounds like this is usually a question that we don't ask always in the abstract, but usually with real people we know around us. When someone we know is in a downward spiral, they've got some sort of problem in their life, they've got something going on, and we want to love them. We look at the New Testament, and there's so many examples of places where people can say, we're called to love, of the commandments that we have, we know that of the utmost importance is to really love one another when it comes to commandments of how we behave with one another. So the question then is, how do we love people who are on this downward spiral? This is a big question when it comes to how we as the church develop compassionate ministry and how we decide who we are and how we become Christ-like. A lot of people look to Christ and say, Christ loved everyone, we're supposed to love everyone. But the thing is that Christ's love was also coupled with transformation. You look at the people he interacted with, whether it be somebody who had a physical problem, they had a health issue, maybe it was somebody who had a social issue, maybe they were doing something in society which put them in a strange position with everyone else. Christ always came and brought healing to that circumstance. That thing which seemed immovable in their life was removed, it was changed, there was transformation. Christ not only loved people, but he also reached out a hand that said, would you like to be saved? Would you like to be transformed? And this isn't always something which is incredibly supernatural. Sometimes these transformations are very practical in the way that we interact with one another. So the question, do we love people from a distance? I want to go to Psalm 23. This is where we've been at in the sermon series and Sunday school material, and I really want to go there simply because I don't want to prove text. I don't want to just pull out random scriptures, but we have a lot of material online with all of this as at the current moment. So in Psalm 23, and y'all forgive the mower sound. For those who know the church, George is outside mowing. So in Psalm 23, and this is verse 4, the question is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now last Sunday, in this current sort of week that we're in, I've been talking a lot about how the rod and the staff go together with the idea of comfort and peace. Peace really is something connected to the idea of love. We love people. And I like to define love as the ability to bless in complex situations, and we'll come back to that in a few moments. But the idea of blessing people in complex situations is so important, especially when we understand, Christ's love. Christ blessed people with complex things around them. Maybe they were tax collectors, maybe they had a sin problem in their life, they were doing something which was immoral. Christ dealt with that and he said, go out into the world, be able to contribute and be a part of society and be changed. Now it's so important when we look to Psalm 23, we see the same thing. We see there's somebody in the darkest valley, they're in a bad situation. The circumstances in their life are bad. But there's the rod. The rod is the instrument which can bring change. It restores order. If you're looking at the idea of sheep and a flock of sheep, the rod and the staff are the thing which restores the order for the sheep. But at the same time, they're coupled with the idea of comfort and mercy. The end goal is comfort, mercy, and peace. So we are called to love people, but we're also called to be instruments of transformation to people. And in the world we're around, and this is really prevalent within the church, there's a lot of people who really advocate for the idea of multiculturalism. They say we got to go out and we got to hear people's story. We want to hear people's story. Well, this is great, and I really like the idea of that, but there's a huge problem with it. Hearing someone's story does not guarantee a multilateral relationship. In fact, anyone who knows human behavior, has ever studied it at any level, will know that some people are pathological. They'll take advantage of that. Some people will tell you their story and not have any intentions on developing a relationship with you. That does not guarantee a two-sided relationship or even one that's multidimensional. It doesn't guarantee a multilateral relationship. It doesn't mean that they're interested in what you have to say. The idea that other people have a story is sort of the basis of moral relativism. But the thing is, just because they may tell you a story and you may want to hear one doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that there's some sort of two-sided relationship that you have with them. It appears to one, it creates an illusion of one. But it's a huge mistake to draw out of that we now have a dynamic relationship with someone. Well, back to the question of love. So we love people in complex situations. You can't just go and ask for their story and say, well, I've dealt with the situation. You know, somebody's in a downward spiral. You don't fix that by hearing someone's story. You don't fix that by simply having a surface level relationship. You as one individual cannot unilaterally change the mind of other people, and nor should we. But we do what we can. We love them. We stretch out with the hand of love, mercy, and comfort. But we also must have the hand of justice. We also must say we have the power and the calling to transform. And sometimes this is very little, very practical transformation in people's lives. But if they're not interested in transformation, then sometimes we do make the choice to love people from a distance. So back to the definition of love. The idea of blessing in complex situations. You know, blessing is something that we define here as the ability to give life and preserve life, which is the opposite, or not really the opposite, but really the antithesis of blessing is the idea of curse, that which initiates the taking of life and that which enables the taking of life. If we're loving someone who's on a downward spiral and we're dedicating resources to them, or someone who is not receptive of change or growth, then we're merely enabling them. And enabling people is a curse, and I'm going to be quite bold in saying that sometimes. I know this isn't so much directed at the question Rachel had, but just in the broad sense. But enabling can definitely be a curse on people. And the church must realize the church is not called to be an enabler. It's called to reach out with love and reach out with transformation. And if we are to be sincere and we understand the Logos, then we're truly called to be a people of transformation. And we understand Christ. You take any example of Christ interacting with people who were healed, saved, and they were blessed. These were people who had some sort of transformation in their life, and it really changed the circumstances. So your question, do we love people from a distance? Or is it okay to love someone from a distance? And the answer I would give to that is yes. You know, when Christ sent out the 12, he said, go and stay with those who receive your message. Not everybody will receive your message. Somebody who tells you their story may not receive your message. We have to put our resources. Stewardship is one of the most important things I think the church has to do. And I mean resources, not material resources, but the abstract ones, our intellect, our time, our energy, our effort. These are the resources we have to allocate well. We have to be very careful in how we use these resources because they're the greatest resources we have. Our character, our temperament, our intellect, these are truly the greatest resources that we're to be stewards of, and our time and energy is in that as well. So if someone is on a downward spiral and they're not willing to receive transformation or change to stop that downward spiral, then I say it is okay to love them from a distance because we do not have infinite resources. I do not have infinite time, energy, and intellect. And I don't need to dedicate those resources to something where the person is not interested in it, when there are people who are interested in those resources, who are worthy of that. If things existed in a vacuum and there was only a few people we could interact with, then maybe we could use those resources there. But there's a whole lot of people that need our energy and our love and care who are receptive of transformation. And so just as Christ, when he said, if they're not going to hear what you have to say, if they don't want to hear, they don't want to receive your message, take the sand off your shoes and move on, because we only have so much time and energy to spend. So that's a fantastic question, Rachel. I love that you asked it. Psalm 23, I think does a great job of addressing this. There's a lot of material for it. If you or anyone listening would like to have more information on that, we have to have the transformation if we're going to have the love. If we want the comfort, then we also have to have the rod. All right, so moving on to the next question. And I really hate that we have this outside, but we're live, so that's sort of one of the funs you get in a live setting. We're not in a fancy studio or anything like that, so you get the raw reality of Jolt in Tennessee, and we are blessed to have George who takes care of things, so he's outside doing that. So the second question I got this week, someone posted this online, but I actually got this question a couple of times and heard other people talking about it this week, and that's the question of why do we need Sunday school? What is the purpose of Sunday school? Why should I go to Sunday school? A lot of times people will change the language of this. In the modern world, they'll call it small group. I don't like the term small group, one, because they usually leave out an article as if it's some sort of passive voice. And I know I'm not one to really go all crazy when it comes to language, but at the same time, I don't like passive voice things. I don't like people trying to use words like small group without an article in a small groups. Um, we can be clear and articulate and sound like intelligible people when we use this sort of language. Well, back to the idea of Sunday school. I really like that term, especially the school side of it. You know, I don't think it just has to happen on Sunday, but the idea of school, it's an educational thing. If there's ever a time when society needed logic and reason as part of our lives and to be taught that, it was now. If there was ever a time when the church needed intellect, when the church needed intellectual rigor, and to be sharing education with one another, it was now. In the year 2017, we're surrounded by postmodernist people who believe in critical theory, in other words, where they criticize everything, but they're not very good with logic. They're not very good with believing that there's logic. And there's a lot of people who are very bold in saying, you know, it starts off with the idea of multiculturalism and relativism, that everybody's got a different story, but the logical end of this is pathology. The logical end of it is that there is no tools for valuing which is good. Well, we need Sunday school because we, as the church, need a time to talk with one another. It's not just about having a Sunday school teacher or someone to lead the class, so that's great, and it's important to have a good Sunday school teacher. But what's even more important is that those who are there in the class have healthy fellowship with one another, where they learn together, where they develop those reasoning skills, where they develop theology that is logical. You know, I believe that we should also be stewards of our education. You know, people, as they learn things, they have a tendency to learn novel things. If something is new and novel, it'll stick with them. You know, I really think when it comes even to a sermon or a class, you know, people really are going to take away one sort of novel idea. And that's a finite resource, our ability to learn. And once people have learned something, it's very difficult to change that. And it's important that when we learn things, we learn them in logic and reason. And as Nazarenes, we understand that we learn and interact with the world by looking to our scriptures, our traditions. We look at history and the things around us. We apply logic and reason to the circumstances around us to develop good understandings of the world around us. So Sunday school is important because we need logic and reason involved in the church and in our lives and in the world around us. God called us so greatly to be renewed in our minds. This wasn't because we're supposed to say, you know, we believe in Christ and then that's the end of it. No, we're supposed to call on one another to be a family, to be the body of Christ. And once we have come into the body of Christ, that calls us to be active in the world, to be the hands and feet of Christ, which means we love people, but we also bring transformation to the world around us. And we're only going to be able to do that well and in a meaningful way if we're people of logic and reason. You know, it's really happened in recent history that people have tried to paint the church as being something against logic and reason, when the very idea of logic and the logos goes back to the nature of Christ. This idea that we can take the things in the world which are chaos and bring order and restoration and some sort of organization to it. These are all very much the core idea of Christ himself and the transformation out of the things which afflict people. So we need Sunday school. We need reason. We need logic. We need people who are well articulated in their understanding of the world. It's so important that we have all of these things. And Sunday school really provides a good avenue for that. Well, with that, I thank you all for watching, and ask questions and I'll be back to answer them next week. Encourage people to be a part of your local communities, be a part of your churches. Look for yourself to be engaging in the body of Christ and stimulate your mind. I want my mind to be challenged by the questions that you present, but I want your minds to be challenged as well. I want us all to be able to learn and to become better people. Well, thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.